It is Friday, March 20, 2026, and welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm your host, and I am here with our resident expert.
Hey there. So glad to be here.
So we've got a fascinating one for you today. We are looking at a document simply titled the Bannock 1970's document.
Yeah, and it's really a completely fresh way to look at that entire decade.
Right, because normally when we talk about the 1970's, it's all just, textbook history, elections, treaties, that kind of thing.
Exactly. But this document uses the Bannock philosophy of leadership. So it's looking at the psychology of the era.
Yeah, how it actually felt to live through it. And our mission today is to completely reevaluate the 1970's using this framework.
Which is wild because they call it the starlight decade.
Okay, let's unpack this because I love that phrase, the starlight decade.
It's super evocative, right?
It really is. Like, think about a sunny day in the 1950's or 60's. The light is blinding. It's just one big, bright sun of national certainty.
Right. One dominant narrative. Everyone basically agrees on the map.
Exactly. But then the 70's hit, and that sun just vanishes, and suddenly you're in the dark.
And you have to navigate by starlight.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to use these tiny, scattered, dim little lights to figure out where you're going.
Which means looking inward. Building your own compass because the big one broke.
And for you listening right now, if you've ever felt like you were doing everything right, like
Yeah.
you followed the rules, but the map you were handed was just completely wrong, this deep dive is going to hit incredibly close to home.
Oh, totally. Because that's exactly what an entire nation felt all at the exact same time.
But to understand the dark of the 70's, we have to talk about the blinding light right before it.
You really can't understand the hangover without talking about the party.
Right. The 1960's road trip. Because these decades aren't in a vacuum, they're the same highway.
Exactly. The Bannock analysis calls the 60s a sunrise that burned way too bright.
So let's use the car analogy from the source, because it's brilliant.
It really is. So imagine a car speeding toward the horizon in the 1960s.
Windows down, music blasting.
Right. And you've got these four archetypes inside. You've got Addie, who's just leaning out the window, chasing the wind. Pure idealism.
Just boundless possibility.
Yeah. Then you have Tommy. And Tommy is literally trying to rewire the dashboard while the car is moving 100 miles an hour.
Because he wants a better system.
Exactly. He's convinced the old machinery is garbage.
Right.
Then in the back, you have Kelly.
Reaching across the seats, right?
Yeah, making sure absolutely no one is left behind.
Yeah.
That's the civil rights movement, the push for social equity, the real moral core of the decade.
And then there's Liz.
Liz is the one who looks at the old map, the 1950s suburban, rigid gender role map, and just tosses it right out the window.
Okay, so it sounds incredibly romantic. It's the ultimate American road trip.
It really is, on paper.
But I have to push back a little here. Didn't all that 60's freedom severely lack, a structural foundation?
Oh, completely.
I mean, it sounds like they were driving 100 miles an hour on pure adrenaline without ever checking the gas tank.
What's fascinating here is that the Bannock framework validates that exact pushback. You nailed it.
Really? So it wasn't just a perfect utopia?
Not at all. The document points out that the 60s had an absolute abundance of light, but zero structural engineering.
They wanted change, but didn't know how to build the new engine.
Right. Everyone in the car passionately wanted a revolution, but no one agreed on the mechanics of how to sustain it.
The energy was high, but totally ungrounded.
Exactly. You can only sustain pure revolution for so long before biology and economics just catch up with you.
Right. Eventually you get tired.
Yeah, the sun starts to set. The boundless hope of the 60s suddenly hits the brutal resistance of reality.
And unity meets ego.
Exactly. And total freedom meets severe consequences.
I mean, just think about the psychological fatigue of that. It is exhausting to sustain pure idealism.
You can only scream at protests for so long.
Right. Eventually your voice gives out and you have to go home and, pay the rent.
The crew in the car didn't lose. They just got incredibly tired.
So what happens when that revolutionary adrenaline wears off, but the journey isn't over?
You're still in the car. You still have to get somewhere. But the music stops and it gets dark.
And right on cue, the dashboard warning lights start flashing violently.
Oh, yeah. The biggest, reddest warning light of them all.
The economy, welcome to the 1970's and the brutal reality of stagflation.
Yes, stagflation is the defining macroeconomic reality here. And the crazy thing is, economists thought it was impossible.
Right, because of the Phillips curve.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The dominant Keynesian model at the time. It said you could have high inflation or you could have high unemployment.
Like a trade-off.
Right. If the economy is booming, inflation goes up. If there's a recession, unemployment goes up. but never both at once.
Until the 1970s.
Yeah, stagflation's the nightmare where you have high inflation, slow growth, and rising unemployment all at exactly the same time.
It's like your favorite software suddenly putting all its basic features behind this massive, expensive paywall. The progress just stops.
The numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the source are just sobering.
Let's hear them.
Okay, so from 1970 to 1974, unemployment averaged 5.4%, which is already high.
Right.
But from 1975 to 1979, it jumped to a devastating 7.8%.
Wow.
And meanwhile, inflation, which used to be around 3.3%, spikes to an average of 9.3%, with moments deep into the double digits.
So prices are screaming higher, but nobody has a job.
The engine is running out of oil, but the pedal is stuck to the floor. The car isn't moving, it's just grinding its gears to dust.
I mean, the document notes that the median household income in 1970 was about $8,730.
Right.
And nominally, salaries went up during the decade, but real purchasing power.
Totally flatlined. The inflation ate every single extra dollar they made.
People were working extra shifts, women were pouring into the workforce.
Just to tread water. Just to keep the exact same standard of living they had 5 years ago.
It's like constantly running on a treadmill that's speeding up faster than you can move. But we really need to explain how this actually happened.
Yes. Because it wasn't just a domestic mistake. It was a massive global humbling.
And it starts with the foundational money supply. 1971, the Nixon shock.
That is the pivotal domino right there.
He unpegs the U.S. dollar from the gold standard, ending Bretton Woods.
Right. After World War II, the world trusted the dollar because it was literally backed by physical gold.
You could exchange it.
Exactly. But by the late 60s, the U.S. had printed so much money for the Vietnam War and the Great Society programs.
They didn't have enough gold in the vault to cover the paper.
Right, so Nixon just severs the tether. He floats the dollar.
Which means the money in your wallet is suddenly just backed by confidence? Psychological confidence in the U.S. government?
And that confidence was about to take a massive hit, which made the dollar drop.
Meaning it takes more dollars to buy imported goods, which sets the stage perfectly for the OPEC oil embargo.
Oh, man. The oil shocks, 1973, and then again in 1979.
This was the moment America realized it wasn't invincible.
Totally. It didn't matter how many nuclear weapons the U.S. had. A coalition of oil-producing nations just turned a valve, and the superpower was paralyzed.
Because oil isn't just gas for your car, it's the blood of the whole economy.
It powers the factories, it runs the diesel trucks, bringing food to the store.
So when oil prices quadruple overnight, everything else explodes in price.
And the visceral reality of this,
Yeah.
the Bannock document describes it so well. People waking up at 4 a.m. to sit in gas lines for miles.
Before the station even opened.
Yeah. And the odd-even license plate rationing. If your plate ended in an odd number, you could only get gas on odd days.
It's wild. They even lowered the national speed limit to 55 just to save fuel.
And you have to remember, this was a country built entirely on the promise of cheap fuel and massive cars.
The whole post-war suburban dream.
And in an instant, that promise is just revoked.
Which forces a huge psychological shift from what the source calls command leadership to adaptive leadership.
Right. The country was humble. The planners in Washington and the families at their kitchen tables had to stop planning decade to decade.
And start surviving week to week.
Exactly. It created this baseline hum of economic anxiety that, frankly, we still feel today.
Okay, so you're in the car, the gas is gone, the engine is tearing itself apart. That's terrifying.
Obviously.
But it's one thing if the car is breaking down. It's another if you realize the driver is actively lying to you.
Yes. Which brings us to the total collapse of institutional trust.
The 1970s featured 3 presidents: Nixon, Ford, and Carter.
But it's not really about the men in the Oval Office. It's about the office itself.
The moral floor fell out at the exact same time as the economic floor.
The Bannock material highlights 3 turning points here. First, the end of the Vietnam War.
The fall of Saigon in 1975.
Right. Seeing those helicopters desperately evacuating people from the embassy roof on live TV, it was undeniable defeat.
And it wasn't just a military loss. It was the revelation of the lies, the Pentagon Papers in 1971.
Oh, absolutely. Proving in black and white that the government had been lying about the war for years.
Across multiple administrations. And then the climax of betrayal. Watergate.
The break-in, the cover-up, the Saturday Night Massacre, the tapes, and then Nixon resigns in August 1974.
Now, before we go further, it is critical to mention a rule for this deep dive. The Bannock text brings up some massively polarizing social collisions.
Really heavy stuff.
Right. Roe v. Wade in 1973, the Equal Rights Amendment battles, the Vietnam protests.
Right.
We need to make it explicitly clear to you listening, we are impartially reporting on this document. We aren't endorsing any political viewpoint.
Absolutely not. We're just reflecting the historical reality from the source that the old normal was being fiercely contested.
The ground was shifting under everyone's feet. Every assumption about gender, power, war, it was all on trial.
And all this is happening while faith in the leaders is just plummeting. The Gallup data is staggering.
Let's hear it.
In May 1972, 73% of the public had high trust in the executive branch.
73%, that's huge.
But by August 1974, after Watergate, it plummeted to just 40%.
Wow. And honestly, it's never really recovered.
It hasn't.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The Bannock framework argues that the actual definition of truth changed.
Yeah, this is a brilliant point.
In the 50s and 60s, truth was an announcement. Walter Cronkite said it, or the president said it at a podium, and it was true.
But in the 70s, it became forensic.
Forensic truth, I love that.
Right. Truth was no longer given. It was suspected of being hidden.
You had to drag it out into the light with subpoenas, whistleblowers, secret tapes.
Woodward and Bernstein style. You didn't trust the announcement, you looked for the leak.
This raises an important question, though. How does a society function when suspicion is the default?
When you fundamentally assume the driver of the car is a liar.
Yeah. Who do you trust?
Well, trust migrated. It went away from executives and moved to the watchdogs.
The journalists.
Exactly. Investigative journalism skyrocketed in prestige. And the courts, too. Like when the Supreme Court forced Nixon to hand over the tapes.
The heroes weren't generals anymore. They were cynical detectives and reporters.
But the document points out this is a double-edged sword.
How so?
Well, on one hand, it creates a much healthier, less naive public. You want citizens who demand receipts.
Right, healthy skepticism.
But on the other hand, it deeply fragmented our shared civic purpose. If everyone assumes every institution is corrupt, how do you build anything?
Corrosive cynicism paralyzes you.
Exactly. And the 70s is when America really crossed that line.
So all these massive institutions are crumbling, the presidency, the military, the economy. Where did all that human belief go?
Because people have to believe in something.
Exactly. We're wired for it. And the Bannock material says it didn't evaporate, it just relocated.
Which creates the core tension of the decade. Cynicism versus self-discovery.
The system is compromised, so I need to become more real. That's the mantra.
Belief moved from the massive institutions straight down to the individual.
If the macro is broken, you obsess over the micro.
And you see this everywhere. The culture completely fragmented into these highly personal expressions.
Let's look at music. It stopped being one national chorus like the Beatles.
Right. It split into survival strategies.
I love that framing. Music as a survival strategy. Let's talk about disco.
Yeah, disco often gets dismissed as shallow, right?
Totally. But the document frames it as an essential strategy for bodily autonomy and joy.
In a time of massive urban decay and economic stress, marginalized communities in places like New York created a sanctuary.
The disco floor was a place where you could reclaim control, feel glamorous, release the pressure through rhythm.
And then, parallel to that, you have punk rock.
The exact same macroeconomic conditions, but a totally different reaction.
Right. Stripped down honesty, pure rage, contempt for failing systems.
Punk says, the system is rotting, so let's play 3 chords and scream about the rot.
It rejected the bloated rock of the era because it felt like a lie.
And then you have the singer-songwriter movement, Joni Mitchell, James Taylor.
A total retreat into the inner landscape. Introspective and confessional.
Because if you can't fix inflation or stop the Vietnam War, maybe you can untangle your own heartbreak on an acoustic guitar.
Exactly. And by the end of the decade, in the burned-out Bronx, you get the early formations of hip-hop.
Born from urban strain and pure creative resilience.
The culture stopped asking, what's the national mood, and started asking, which room of the house are you surviving in right now?
And it wasn't just music, it was behavior. Therapy culture exploded.
New Age spirituality, self-help books, meditation, jogging crazes.
People were desperate to optimize their inner lives because their outer lives were out of control.
Now, this is where we need to challenge a really common misconception.
The whole me decade label, right? Tom Wolfe.
Yes, it implies that everyone just woke up, got lazy, abandoned their civic duty, and became selfish.
But the Bannock document makes a massive distinction between selfishness and self-focus.
A crucial distinction. The text rejects the lazy critique. Individualism in the 70s was a necessary survival response.
Selfishness is a disregard for others, but self-focus in the 70s was triage.
Exactly. When the ground is giving way, you have to find a solid foundation.
If the government is lying, and the economy is eating your paycheck, and traditional gender roles are blowing up in your living room,
You naturally ask, who am I apart from all these failing scripts?
you retreat to a perimeter you can actually control.
Your body, your
Mhm.
health, your immediate local community. When the national map is gone, you build a private compass.
And honestly, this lays the exact groundwork for the modern world we live in right now.
Oh, absolutely. The figure it out yourself culture.
The focus on mental health, personal identity, it wasn't born with the internet. It was born in the rubble of 1970s institutional failure.
People learned nobody was coming to save them, so they had to save themselves.
The world became a multi-lane highway. Cultural fragmentation was a feature, not a bug. Okay, so this huge philosophical shift wasn't just happening in textbooks, it was playing out in real orange and brown living rooms.
The texture of daily life. What it actually felt like on a Tuesday night.
Let's get into that, the visceral reality.
It was defined by week-to-week survival, but paired with this desperate desire for domestic comfort.
Right, because you go from the boundless convenience of the 50s where appliances solve everything and meat is cheap, straight into severe economic squeezing.
But the cultural expectation of a nice family dinner was still there.
Which gives us the golden age of casseroles.
TV dinners, canned vegetables, hamburger helper.
The sheer grit of a parent stretching one roast chicken across a whole week of meals because inflation is devouring the budget.
But alongside that harsh practicality, there was this intense grasp for internal comfort and style.
The aesthetics are iconic. Wood paneling, shag carpets, fondue pots.
The earthy colors, avocado green, harvest gold,
People were trying to make their homes feel as insulated and warm as a cave.
because the outside world felt so cold and unpredictable, it was a retreat to the hearth.
And the media they watched in those living rooms changed too. The rise of New Hollywood.
Scorsese, Coppola, Lumet, movies like Taxi Driver and Network.
No more clean, good guy wins musicals.
Yeah.
It was deeply flawed, anti-heroes, paranoia, gritty urban realism.
The art reflected the newfound cynicism. They didn't want a tidy, happy ending because their real lives didn't have one.
But at the exact same time, analog tech was shifting in ways that would change human connection forever.
Right. We're still tethered to landlines with long, curly cords, watching 3 networks.
But the foundations of the digital age are being laid. Cassettes let people curate their own music. Early cable starts to fracture the monoculture.
The first consumer microprocessors are being built in garages.
It's eerie. The machines are getting smarter just as human societal trust is falling apart.
Totally. But the quirky human details are my favorite part of the Bannock document.
Oh, me too. Because when people are stressed, they cope in the strangest ways.
Like CB radios.
Yes, everyday people installing radios in their cars, adopting handles, talking to total strangers. Breaker,
It
breaker.
was an analog social network, an anonymous chat room before the internet.
And the fashion. Massive bell-bottoms, wide lapels, mustaches everywhere.
And we have to talk about the pet rocks.
I was just going to say, 1975, the pet rock phenomenon.
It's explicitly analyzed in the source material.
I look at this data and I have to ask, why on earth were millions of Americans spending their inflation-shrunk paychecks on literal rocks in cardboard boxes?
During a massive energy crisis.
It sounds completely insane.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, it makes perfect psychological sense. The Bannock source looks at it through class divides and coping mechanisms.
Okay, looking at this breakdown, it seems really divided. The wealthy treated the 70s as an annoyance, while the working class treated it as a daily survival test. Am I reading that right?
You are. The wealthy were insulated. They had the capital to absorb the inflation shocks.
Right.
But the working class felt it in their gut. Factory layoffs, gas lines, the terror that a broken fridge could ruin them financially for a year.
They just relied on sheer grit. And what about the massive middle class?
They lived with this low electrical hum of constant tension. They had their homes and jobs, but nothing felt secure. Upward mobility felt like it had flatlined.
So when the macro environment, the Cold War, OPEC feels terrifyingly out of your control.
Human psychology demands that you seek control in the microenvironment.
The micro environment.
Quirky fads like the pet rock or the CB radio community or the highly regimented steps of a disco dance.
They were harmless, accessible ways to maintain human connection.
And embrace a little shared absurdity.
Yeah.
You can't control the Federal Reserve, but you can buy a pet rock, Put it on your desk and laugh about it with a neighbor.
You curate your own little world. That is profound. An analog coping mechanism for systemic dread.
Exactly.
And it's wild to think the 70s was the last truly mass culture era.
Right. Fragmentation was starting, but millions still sat down to watch MH or All in the Family at the exact same hour.
It's the precipice, right before cable and the internet shatter shared reality completely.
They were desperately holding on to a shared American experience while their economic realities were pulling them apart.
And how you experienced that tension depended entirely on which seat in the car you were in.
The generational breakdown in the Bannock document is brilliant.
It really is. It doesn't treat the 70s as a monolith. It shows how different age groups had entirely different relationships with trust.
It isolates the exact psychology of the crew in the car.
Let's go through those seats, starting with the child, ages 5 to 12.
The source says they had an inherited weakening trust.
Because a 7-year-old doesn't understand Watergate or the Phillips curve.
No, but they are physically sitting in the backseat of the Pinto during a 2-hour gas line.
They're watching cartoons on the shag carpet, but absorbing the deep background tension of their parents whispering about money.
They don't know why the light is dimming, but they know it's getting darker.
They grow up a bit more watchful, a bit more cynical than the 1950s kids.
Right. Then you have the teenager, ages 13 to 19. The text says they are actively rejecting trust.
Because they look around and think, the adults are completely clueless.
Exactly. The president is a crook, the war was a lie, the economy is a mess.
So they retreat to the basement, embrace punk rock or hard rock, and experiment with identity.
It's a journey from confusion to active rebellion. They reject the map because they know it's a lie.
Then, skipping to the other end, you have the elder, age 60 and up.
Their relationship to trust is that they have simply lost it.
They're looking in the rearview mirror. They lived through the Depression, won World War II, built the post-war boom.
And now they see chaos, inflation, and moral ambiguity. They feel this profound, aching nostalgia.
Mourning the loss of shared certainty, wondering if the old map was actually better or just familiar.
They feel the country slipping through their fingers.
Which brings us to the most critical group, the adult, ages 25 to 50.
Their trust has been broken, but they're the ones driving.
Right. If you had to isolate it, which generation carried the heaviest emotional and practical burden?
Oh, without a doubt, the adults. The source is exceptionally clear. They had what the document calls go down with the ship energy.
Go down with the ship energy. That is heavy.
It's the ultimate burden of responsibility. They couldn't afford to rebel like the teens or just reminisce like the elders.
They were bearing the crushing daily weight of inflation.
Waking up in the dark, waiting in gas lines, and then somehow getting to work on time.
Navigate and shifting gender roles in their own marriages as women entered the workforce.
Watching the Watergate hearings, realizing the government was corrupt, feeling the ground give way.
But then having to turn off the TV, make a casserole stretch for 3 days, help kids with homework, and just keep functioning.
They had no luxury of despair. They were the load-bearing bridge.
The structural link between the lost trust of the past and the uncertain future.
Gripping the steering wheel on a dark highway while the engine fails.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of this document, the final lesson. If you are that adult driving a broken car with no map and a scared, cynical crew, how do you actually lead?
You have to abandon the old playbook entirely. You have to adopt the Bannock philosophy. You must learn to lead under starlight.
So what does this all mean? Lead under starlight. Explain the mechanics of that.
Well, the 1970s wasn't a decade of collapse. It was a decade of massive redistribution.
Belief moved from institutions to individuals.
Certainty moved to questioning. Unity moved to plurality.
So how does a leader behave in that environment?
It means the old command leadership, pointing at a map and demanding compliance, is dead.
Because the crew knows the map is flawed.
Exactly. Leading under starlight means quiet, consistent presence, slow, adaptive guidance, prioritizing relational trust over positional authority.
When the headlights go out, you don't arrogantly pretend you know the exact route.
That just breeds more cynicism. A true leader acknowledges the dark. They say, we don't have clear direction, the old map is gone, but we still have each other and we will navigate this together.
That is so incredibly resonant. The 70s handed the 80s an exhausted, cynical country ready for a hard pivot.
Right.
But it also planted the deepest seeds of modern emotional intelligence. It taught us that when grand structures fail, interpersonal bonds are the only viable infrastructure left.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the source text delivers this profound quote. When the world stopped feeling certain, people started becoming real.
Wow. When the world stopped feeling certain, people started becoming real. I'm going to be thinking about that for a long time. The stripping away of certainty forces authenticity.
It's the ultimate takeaway. When the bright light of illusion fades, you finally see what people are made of in the dark.
Well, we have reached the end of our journey down this stretch of highway. To you, listening right now, thank you for taking this deep dive with us into such a misunderstood, shadowy, but deeply beautiful decade.
It's been quite a ride.
It really has. Because this isn't just history. We all have starlight periods in our own lives, right? Moments where the institutions or companies we trusted fail us.
The map we were handed for our life turns out to be useless.
And we are forced, through self-discovery and grit, to build our own internal compasses.
It's a universal human experience just played out on a massive national scale in the 70s.
But I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. Something that pushes this framework into the future.
I love this idea.
Think about the 21st century we live in right now. The overwhelming flood of information, the deep fakes, the institutional failures, the algorithmic chaos dictating reality.
It's blinding.
What if the deep, painful disillusionment of the 1970s was actually a strictly necessary evolutionary step?
An antibody.
Yes. If that generation hadn't been forced through the fire to build strong, skeptical, internal compasses,
If he hadn't taught the culture how to question authority and survive without a perfect map.
would we have been completely destroyed by the sheer information overload of today?
Would we have the psychological armor required for the internet age?
Yeah.
Or would we just believe everything on a screen?
Exactly. Maybe we needed the exhausting darkness of the 70s to prepare our cultural immune system for the chaotic light of today. So the next time you feel like you are driving in the pitch black and the map is gone, remember the starlight decade. You don't need a perfect map to keep moving. You just need to know who is in the car with you and keep your hands on the wheel. Until next time, keep learning.